past, what I've done is really get into the weeds about the formatting itself. What I'm going to do is trust that you all have the ability to read. I know you guys can all read, so I may not be going into quite as much detail on the formatting side as we have in the past. And if my PowerPoint will get working, then we'll get started. All right, getting started on the right page, formatting your thesis or dissertation. Can we see my screen? I'm always bad about doing that. Awesome. Okay, so formatting your thesis or dissertation. The formatting piece of this process is a little bit meticulous and a lot about just making sure that your paper meets the formatting requirements that are put upon us by the repository and also based on the University of Idaho requirements. And I'm here to help you check your work. So just jumping right in, what is an ETD advisor? That's me. My name is Molly Scheffler. Hello. And so we're going to go through a few of the things that I do just to make sure that we're all on the same page. So the primary thing that I do is I check your paper for formatting issues. So you are going to hopefully utilize the information you get from here and the ETD handbook to start off on a really good foot. But I'm here to double check your work and make sure that all those little gremlins that slip through the cracks are noted. And so then I'll note and communicate those issues to you through ETD. So as confusing as it is, ETD is electronic and thesis and dissertation, but it's also the name of the platform that we utilize to for me to check your work, for you to submit your work to me to check, and for us to go through the approval process and then ultimately publishing of your work. So we will go into more detail about the ETD process later in the presentation, but I do all of my communicating with you on that platform so that we make sure that we don't lose any notes or drafts of your document in our email chains. I don't know about you, but I lose stuff in Outlook all the time. And then as we move forward, after your defense, I will approve your paper for formatting. So you will have two approval deadlines. The first one is for me for formatting. And when I approve the paper, it starts the approval process, the final approval process for content in the ETD platform for your committee and your department head. So I approve and then I oversee the approval process by your committee and department head in the system. And then once that approval process is done, I finish up your records, I sign your final defense form, and I send all of that information to the registrar's office so that they know you are officially done. It's gonna feel like when you complete your defense, you're done, you did it, and that is a major accomplishment, but it is not the very end. You don't officially get your degree until your paper is approved after your defense. All right. Oh, and secondly, I would just quickly like to mention a couple of things that I don't do just to make sure that everybody is aware. I don't edit your paper for you for the formatting. You may know that. I know that some people have thought in the past that I do that. I don't. So sorry. Number one, because I purely don't have the time to. And number two, kind of defeats the purpose of you learning how to utilize Word or LaTeX or whatever program you're using to write this academic paper. So learning how to utilize those skills is really, really important. And so while I'll do my best to give you tips and tricks, your best case is to work with your major professor, work with your fellow students, and look stuff up online if you're getting in a bind on the formatting side. And then the second thing that I don't do, and I just want to make sure everybody knows this, because particularly in spring it gets crazy, is that I can't meet your deadlines for you. And what that means is that this part of your degree is completely self-managed. And it's probably one of the most important pieces of your degree. I'm not an instructor, so I don't have the ability to give extensions or incompletes or make allowances. So if you miss your deadlines, you don't get your degree. That's kind of the long and short of it. So in order to make sure that you meet those deadlines and get everything done, you need to be in constant communication with me and with your committee and department head to make sure that you're up to date on where the approvals are at, that you get the notes that you need to from them and all that. So please make sure that you are really hands-on with this part of the process because at the end of the day, it's all up to you to make sure you get done. Okie dokie. So diving right in, we're going to talk through the formatting requirements, and I am going to list out some of the components that you're required to have and that you may need to have in your paper. And then I will show you the thesis and dissertation resources page, which is your landing spot for pretty much any stuff that I talk about today and more. So I'll show you that page and kind of give you a quick overview of where things are. Then we'll show you the ETD handbook. I'm working on getting a new version onto the website, so I will be showing you the brand new shiny version. Should be up in the next couple of days. There are just a couple of little tweaks that I made, but for the most part, if you're working off of the older version, that should work fine too. So we have our first question. We dropped this in the chat. We're trying to figure that out. So yes, we
Yeah, currently trying to drop it in the chat as
I'm
we speak.
sorry, I don't know
Yeah.
why it's doing that, but if worse comes to worse and we can't drop it in the chat, I do believe that we have everybody's information who's at this. So if we can't get it into the chat, I will make sure that you all get it by email.
So
Okay.
it'll also be in the Canvas course, like with the recording of this. So, but we are trying. There's
Yeah,
all seems
we're
to be
working on it.
new
Yeah.
rules about getting it into the chat, which is weird.
I
I
know.
actually have
Okay.
everyone's email who signed up for this, so I can just send it via email really fast. I'll just do
Amazing.
that. That might be easiest. Yeah.
And I'll show you all of this in here and then we'll make sure that you get it. They're really good resources and it should help you get started on the right foot. So quickly check. Okay, cool. And then the last piece, I'm going to try and manage my time properly, but I want to spend about 10 minutes going through my new favorite thing, which is our ETD FAQs page. So I'm working on getting that online as well, but we will be sending this to you. It is a great starting place that has the deadlines that are required for you for whichever semester you're aiming for, and then some frequently asked questions that students run into as they're starting to work in the ETD platform. These are the things that I've found really hold people up from getting started, and getting started on the formatting piece can start at any time. So when you're working with me, I'm not reading the content. I'm not really checking anything that you've actually written. I'm just looking at the formatting. So if you can knock out the formatting stuff, even before you've started or completed your content edits, really expedites the process because I'm really picky and I will more than likely send your paper back to you anywhere from 2 to 5 times for formatting. So the sooner I can get a look at your paper, the sooner you can knock that piece out. And then when it comes to the end process after your defense, we'll knock it out really quickly and you won't have to stress. So that's the main goal for going through all of this. Okie dokie. So your format, these are the basics. I'll show you where there's a longer list of information. So first and foremost, in your paper, you're going to set the margins for a little bit different than normal. So instead of having 1 inch on each side, on the left side of your page, it's going to be 1.25 inches on the left and then 1 inch on all the others. Oh, okay. So because we want to make sure that if your paper was bound and printed out, the binding on the left side would not run into your content, basically. That is why it needs to be set 1.25 on the left. Margins are super, super important. any content that goes over the margins is going to have to be moved. I am a real stickler about the margins. So even if your content is over by a fraction of an inch, I'm gonna send it back to you and have you fix it. So please believe me, I'm peering very closely at the screen and I am able to maybe see stuff that you can't. So please just trust me. If I tell you it's over the margins, it's over the margins. Your page numbers should be in the upper right corner on your portrait pages, which is the majority of the pages that you'll use. So it'll be in the upper right corner, about 7.75 inches from the top and 1 inch from the right. And then in parentheses, it says, except for landscape pages, those are a whole beast we will talk about a little bit later, but page numbers shouldn't have your name or anything else. They should just have the page number in that upper right-hand corner. Your font should be anywhere from 10 to 12 point. Any smaller, and it's kind of difficult to read. Any larger, and it kind of looks like you're trying to make sure that you hit a like page number count. And we had a great question that I was going to mention, so I'm glad we're on the same page. Your font size, it can be smaller if it's for the captions. This is just for the main body of the paper. We want it to be legible. But when you're doing your captions and whatnot, that font size can be smaller. It typically is. And so that's great. Yes. And as Amanda says, the template has it set in 9-point font. Try not to go too small with those figure captions, but yes, it definitely can be smaller. Alrighty. And then your spacing of the lines of text in the paper should be 1.5 to 2 space. Anything smaller than that, again, the text is a little bit too close together to see. Anything further apart, it looks like you're trying to hit a page number count like you're in middle school. So just make sure that it looks polished and professional. Again, with the spacing of that text, that is not applicable to your captions, but you are welcome to choose whatever spacing you want. Here's the major thing though. For all of this stuff, for your font, for your spacing, even for your headings, and even the indentation of your paragraphs, consistency is the number one key to making sure that your paper looks polished. And I will tell you, and I will probably tell you when I see your paper for the first time, consistency or inconsistency. So that means inconsistency in the spacing, in the font size, whatever the case may be. That is the number one issue that I see in papers because it's the most difficult for you to notice, but it's also the thing that can upset the requirements. So I'm here to make sure that I notice those things and I communicate with them. But as long as you're aware of them too, it can really help the process and the speed by which you go through things. But yes, make sure that you are consistent in whatever your choices are. We don't really have rules about what you decide to do with the style of your paper as long as you are consistent. And you will probably hear me say that a lot. So please bear with me if I repeat myself or rattle on when I'm sending you notes. It's really just like we don't have any specific rules about what you choose. So the components of your paper, and I will try to mention the ones that are required and the ones that are optional, but are likely going to be seen. So in your paper, the preliminary pages are going to be your title page. There should not be a page number appearing on that page. So you're going to have a title page and you're going to have an abstract page. The acknowledgements and the dedication pages are not required, but they are very often seen because the acknowledgements page is the page by which you can thank your academic or professional community and say thank you to them, say thank you for funding, whatever the case may be. There should not be any personal thank yous on the acknowledgements page. So if you do have personal thank yous, such as faith, family, friends, dogs, cats, whatever the case may be, that should be on the dedication page instead. And quickly we'll check the chat. Okay, perfect. You are required to have a table of contents that can have as much or as little information as long as you are for sure mentioning your main pages. but you do have to have a table of contents. Then if you have any like figures, tables, or equations in your paper, you are required to list them in the lists section. So that will follow your table of contents. Again, I will show you all of this in the handbook, but those are things that you are required to have. Now, the two final things in the preliminary pages would be a statement of contribution and an introduction. The statement of contribution applies to those of you who are utilizing work that you have co-authored with other people in the main body of your paper. So for those of you, I see this particularly with dissertation students, if you have written a paper that is, you're working on submitting to a journal or whatever the case, if you have co-authors on that, you will have to have a statement of contribution. If you're unsure about that, check with me or check with your major professor, and you should be able to determine whether you need one and what the content on that page should be. And then finally, an introduction. If you have an introduction and it's not part of one of your chapters, it should be in the preliminary pages. And then following that, you will transition into the main pages of the paper. There will be a page number type switch. I will talk about that when we get to the handbook. But anything that follows that should be a chapter. So you'll go into your chapters, however many or few as you should have. And then after your chapters, you will have a references section. Please note, if you are going to have, you are more than welcome to put your references at the end of each chapter, or you can put them all together at the end in one section. But whatever the case may be, the references should always follow the chapters. And then following the references, if you do have them, that is where your appendices would go. And again, I'll show you this in the handbook, but that's the main order of the way that the paper should go. Okie dokie, let's go to the resources page. All right, let me make sure that everybody can see. All right, can everybody see the web page that I am on? Is that a yes, Michael?
Yeah,
yes.
yes.
Amanda? Okay, super duper. This page is the best. We do our best to put everything you might need to know in this section. And thank you, Amanda. She has dropped the link. If you were looking for this link, you didn't grab it while you're in the presentation, just look up thesis or dissertation resources, and you should be able to find it. It is a fantastic page full of tons of information. And I'll just try to highlight kind of the main ones that you'll probably utilize and show you a couple of special pages that I love. So the first link on here is your ETD account. This will take you to the ETD platform where you will start the ETD process. That will get a whole other section later. And then you have the general ProQuest site. You have the template, which is also located over here in this gray box. You'll have some examples, writing assistance services, and then formatting review services. That's me. And then a couple other main points that I want to draw your attention to. This is the repository agreement. You will be required to complete this at some point during the process, but it is kind of blocker for some people, so I will talk about that later. But it's in a bunch of different places, but this is where you can mainly find it. And then finally, my very favorite page on here is the dates and deadlines. We are going to talk about this in some detail because I want to make sure that nobody has any misapprehensions. I'm not going to talk about it now. I'm going to talk about it at the end, but I want to make sure you know where this page is. So if you click on the dates and deadlines page, and then you scroll down and select theses and dissertations, this is going to take you to the very specific deadlines that we have for your process as you get closer to finishing. So this great chart here has all of the specific deadlines for your steps to graduation, has application to graduate, requesting to defend, the last day to defend and submit draft ETT, the approval deadline for formatting, and the approval deadline for publication on the content side. So again, I will dive into this in more detail later. this is where this is located. And this right here has a great expansion list for all of these things and a great little infographic too. We're ready to go. So just want to make sure you all know that this is here, and it is very important because these deadlines can be confusing. So if you are wanting to know information, please look at this page before anything else. We are really working hard on getting everybody the appropriate information, including the faculty members, because sometimes they can provide misinformation. So we're trying to do our best to educate everybody, but this page right here should be your main source of information for these deadlines. So that's that. And then let's see, do I have my... All right, we're going to now switch to the... And I haven't updated this on the PowerPoint yet. So I'm going to pull up our ETD handbook, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what the paper looks like. So very quickly, let me make sure that I am sharing the right screen because I didn't do that last time. Okie dokie. And just to confirm, Michael, can we see this page, the handbook page? Heck yeah. All right. So this is the best thing. I did not create this. My predecessor created this. I've made some little changes to it, but it is a great resource. Again, I'm going to try not to dive too much into the weeds because if I could, I would sit here and read the handbook to you. It would take us 2 hours for me because I would just yap. So you have the opportunity to go through and read this information and get a lot more detail about what we're talking about. But this template is set up so that if you are using Word, you can use this document to start and write your paper, and it is preset with all of the formatting requirements. It's fantastic. For those of you who are not using Word, who may be using a different program like LaTeX to write this, there's a PDF version of this that you can read through, and it is, again, the Bible when it comes to writing your paper. So please make sure that you read it carefully and understand the requirements that are listed. So as previously stated, this is going to be your title page. As you can see, there is no page number up here, even though this is technically page number 1. The highlighted information on here is where you will fill in your information. So if it's a dissertation, dissertation. If it's a thesis, write thesis. You will then write your degree. And then your major is going to be your overall major. It's not going to be your specialty. And then as you can note here, you are graduating from the College of Graduate Studies. You are not graduating from your specific college that you're working on your degree in. So even though technically you're doing your work with them, you're graduating from the College of Graduate Studies, so you will not overwrite anything here. After you enter your name, so we know what amazing person is finishing this paper, you're then going to go to the approved by section. This is where you will enter your information for your committee. So you will list your major professor, then you will list any additional committee members. You do not need to list your major professor in this section as it is default that they are on your committee. Now this one right here, department administrator, this is a catch-all term. So there's no like department administrator role technically, typically in a college. The reason we put department administrator is because each department calls their department head, the department chair, the department director, they each call it something different. So in order to maintain uniformity, we use the term department administrator. So this would be your department head, the head of your department, director, chair, whatever they call it. And that's whose name you will put in there. If your committee or your department, like your major professor, if either of those two groups have your department administrator in it, you will put their name a second time. So make sure that you don't leave this blank, and you will just enter their name. And then finally on this page, you're going to have the date. The date is going to be the month in which you're getting your degree. So if, for instance, you are finishing your paper this semester, the date would be May 2025. If you are finishing in the summer semester, the date would be August 2025. If you're finishing in fall, the date would be December 2025. Don't worry, I will check this for you, but just so you know, that is what the date is. So your abstract page, just to highlight here, this is where your preliminary page numbers will start to appear. You will start at 2 because the title page is technically page number 1, but we will not want a page number to be on there. It is going to be lowercase Roman numerals for your preliminary pages, and they're going to start at 2. So again, your abstract page is going to follow your title page. Here's the acknowledgements page. If you do not want this page, you do not have to use it, but it is a great place to list out anybody who you want to thank who is integral in your academic or professional capacity that got you here. Following that, there will be your dedication page. This is where you thank your family and friends. As you can see, in difference to all other pages, your dedication page title and text is going to be centered vertically and horizontally because we want it to stand out. These are the people who have been by your side throughout this whole thing. I've seen dogs, I've seen loved ones, I've seen, grandparents, grandmas, people like that. So this is where you're going to thank the special personal people in your life who have really helped you get to this point. Again, not required, but recommended. Then you're going to get into the table of contents. We have all these listed here. This is so that you can write these in and work with the template, and it should automatically update it for you, which will be a great asset to you. Is there a page limit for something like a dedication? No, there is not. I've typically seen people do one smaller page, but again, you are more than welcome to put more in there. Just make sure that no matter how much text you have on a dedication page, that the content is centered as much as possible. So, because again, we want it to stand out a little bit. So here in the table of contents, it's going to list out a lot of information. You're going to have your chapter titles and headings within the chapter. You can list as many or as few headings within the chapter as you would like, as long as you are consistent with that. And just a quick note, because occasionally I see this happen and it's auto-populated, you do not need to list the table of contents in the table of contents. It's redundant, so you don't need to have that line in there. Also of note, you do not have your title page listed in here. The table of contents starts at 2. Alrighty. Can we put numbers in front of the headings like 1.1? Absolutely, you can. You can definitely do that. We typically don't see that with the chapters, but you can 100% have your headings and sections numbered. And if you're going to do that, you need to make sure you do that throughout the entire paper. So you can't have them numbered in one chapter and not have them numbered in another, if that makes sense. Okie dokie. And then, yes, these are just like further listed out. But as you can see, you have the literature cited page and then your appendices follow. Here's your list of tables. The list of tables comes next, and then it's list of figures. That's just the way we do it. So make sure that you have them in that order. And as you can see, this is kind of similar to your table of contents in that you have these page numbers listed over here at the end of the dotted line. And then your list of figures again. Y'all know how this works. Okay, here's the statement of contribution. If you do have one, write it here. If you don't have one, please delete this page. All right, and then getting into the chapters, as you can see up here in the upper right-hand corner, your page numbers change. They change to Arabic numerals, so 1, 2, 3, and they're going to start at 1. So sometimes Word will auto fix this for you. Just make sure you double check it when you're working through it. Sometimes it'll want to start the numbers at like 12 or 13 or something, depending on how many preliminary pages you have. Make sure these start at 1. And then just quickly, I want to show you, because this is my chance to show you all the little bits and bobs. This is how you would cite a chapter that has been submitted or published. So if you are going to be working with content that you have been working on as a standalone work, you'll want to make sure that you cite that paper underneath the chapter title. Again, that's not for everybody, but if you have questions on that, please just send me an email. But this is an example of what the citation would look like under the chapter title. Obviously, you don't need to have this example section there. And then this, so you can see we've got a ton of great information, contact info, standards, all that jazz. And then this is going to list out all of the formatting information that I have already yammered on about. Here's an example, like we said, of the smaller font size in comparison to your figure. One of the things that I will say, since I have the chance, your figure captions are going to be a boon. I am really sorry about that, but if you don't have consistent spacing on your figure captions, I'm gonna keep sending it back to you. Just as a quick note, sometimes your figures will have excess white space around them. That's gonna push away the content. So I can't see the excess white space around it. Should you put it through in a PDF, so you want to make sure that you crop that space if you're having trouble getting them consistently spaced. Also to be noted is, as you can see, I have this grid line pattern in the back of my document. You're going to get sick of me saying it, but turning on grid lines in Word is one of the best things you can do to help you make sure your spacing is accurate. So you can turn that on by selecting View, and then in the Show section, you're going to click grid lines. So if you click that, takes it off. You click that, turns it back on. That's going to be really, really helpful for you as you're checking the spacing. So again, blah, blah, blah. This is all the great information that you have. Again, please read this, but it's not necessarily that pertinent to me yammering on about it because I know you all can read. This section here is about the ETD process. I'm going to chat to you about that in a little bit. This has this reiterated. Blah, blah, blah. So we're going to get through all of this, and I just want to show you, so like here's your conclusion. Okay, this is the end. And then you're going to move on to the literature cited section. And then here is our big beastie, landscape pages. I want to make sure that we talk about this. They are a huge pain in the butt because you have to integrate page breaks and you have to move the settings of your pages because in order for your content, should it be printed out and the pages stacked on top of each other, in order for that to be consistent, you have to change the landscape page settings to make sure that that reflects what it would be if it were rotated. So the top margin of your landscape page is going to be 1.25. That is in keeping that if it were rotated this way, that the 1.25-inch section would be in the same section as your portrait pages. And then right down here in the bottom corner, let me see if I can move you guys so I can see it. Down here in this right bottom corner, that is where your page number has to be. Because again, if you rotate these pages, you want to make sure that the page numbers match up. The page numbers on your landscape page are going to be the thing that kills you. I have had tons of students be so close to being done, but they could not get their landscape page numbers to line up properly. So my recommendation to you, should you have landscape-oriented content, and there's just a few pages of it, rotate the content itself so that it fits within a portrait page as opposed to trying to integrate landscape pages. They are such a pain in the butt. But if you do need to use them, make sure that you utilize the template and follow the instructions. And then finally, you will have the appendices. And here we have this beautiful formatting checklist. So if nothing else, if you absorb nothing else from this, use this checklist. It is going to list out all the requirements that you need. And then it is going to have the components checklist. So this is in just these two pages. This is on the thesis and dissertation resources page. Should you like to just utilize this as your checklist, but it is fantastic. And it really, if you read this, nothing else, you're going to be set up really well moving forward. And then finally, there is some great information, extra information should you want to do this on your own. If you're a word whiz and you want to start your document without using the template, these are great troubleshooting options for you if you're having issues with the headings, with your captions, and even with, like entering certain things. So this is great information. Please make sure you read through it if you have any questions. And then finally, I just want to highlight one thing that I glossed over as we went. So as you can see here, this is an active link. This says it in the handbook, but I'll reiterate it here. Do as we say and not as we do. Active links are not permitted in your paper. I will make you deactivate them if they're in there. However, we broke the rules because we wanted to give you some great links to resources as you go through this process. So if you're running into issues and questions and you want some more information, these resources are great, or honestly, Google is your best friend if you're looking to fix something. So, and then that is the end of the handbook. So again, please read this. It is a fabulous source of information. I could go on and on, but I know y'all can read, so you can make sure you do that. Okay, and then finally, what I'd really like to take the rest of our time to do, again, please shout out questions if you have them, but I'd really like to take the rest of our time and discuss some really important things that I think sometimes students, you get in the weeds about stuff and you're not aware of. So hopefully by providing this information, it will help you manage your time well, and you are able to not run into some of the roadblocks that I've seen a lot of students run into. So let me pull up. This is my favorite new thing that I've created. I'm going to share this. Again, we are trying to work on getting this out to each and every student that is getting close to being finished, but you guys get to see it firsthand. And we'll make sure that you receive this. Okay, so Michael, I'm sorry you're my guy, but can you see the PDF I'm showing? Beautiful. Okie dokie. This, if nothing else, and you're like, okay, how do I even start this process? This is great information to have. So we're going to go through it hopefully fairly quickly. Let me shrink down a little bit. All righty. So the first thing that's in this little cheat sheet is the deadlines. So your deadlines, I warned you I was going to yammer about this. Here it is. These deadlines, it's really important that you understand them. And again, these deadlines are self-enforced. So sometimes I'll have students ask me, how long is this going to take? This is really entirely up to you how long this takes. Depends on how closely and how quickly you fix the formatting issues. It depends on how much in contact you are with me and your committee. I will just say this. I know that faculty members can be challenging to work with at times. They can be tough to get a hold of. It is really important that you try to hammer into them how important this is, but we are also on our side trying to work on making sure they know the vitality of their role in this process. I've had them not give notes until the last minute. I've had them go out of town. So we're going to talk through the deadlines. I'm going to try to explain why it's so important that we meet them. So this has listed out the next few semesters of the deadlines. I'm going to explain what they are, but I'm not going to talk about them too much. The no registration deadlines, so you can see them for summer and fall. These deadlines are for should you be in between semesters. So you're not going to be able to defend or finish your paper by the deadlines for spring. You are able to finish your work in between semesters and not have to register for the semester you're going to be graduating. And typically it's required that you be a registered student. These deadlines allow you to avoid that. So for some reason you miss the deadline in spring or summer, you can then shift your graduation date to summer or fall without having to be a registered student. But For simplicity's sake, we're going to talk about the spring 2025 semester deadlines so I can tell you a little bit more about what they mean. These are listed out in more detail down here, but I'm going to yammer to you as well. So apply to graduate, 25 before, 60 after. That just means that if you haven't yet applied to graduate this semester, the amount of money you would be paying is $60 to apply. Your last day to request to proceed. Should you be finishing this semester, that's going to be the 4th of April. Slight caveat on this. This is the last day to request to proceed if you are defending on the 18th and you're a dissertation student. So for the students who are working on their dissertations, you are required to have your request to proceed in 2 weeks prior to your defense. We are required to advertise your defense to the academic community at large, so you have to submit that 2 weeks before your defense date. If your defense date is the 31st of March, then you would need to submit it 2 weeks prior to that. For those of you working on a thesis or a master's student, you do not have the same deadline. You can request to proceed within 48 hours, but you do need to make sure you have that request to proceed in before you defend, because we have to send you some information, and most importantly, your final defense form. Just to make sure that everybody knows, your last day to defend is going to be the 18th of April, should you be defending this semester. So that means this is the very last day for you to complete your defense. So if you're planning and you're looking around that time, just make sure that you don't go past that point. And that applies for any semester. And then this is an important little addition that we have added. Submit draft to ETD for review. This is the last day to do that. What does that mean? That means that in order for me to check the formatting, you have to submit a draft to ETD. I have to be able to look at your paper before your defense, particularly if you are not defending until late into the semester, because right now I have like 2 papers, I think, that are in my queue. When we get towards the end of the semester, I'm actively working with anywhere from 60 to 70 people in the spring. So that means that I'm working 10-hour days, I'm cranking through papers, but there's going to be more time in between when you submit and when I'm able to check it. So the sooner you submit, the better. But if you wait until after your defense to submit your paper for me to check, it's going to take longer. There is higher chance that you're not going to meet your deadlines. So just keep that in mind. It is significantly easier to do your formatting stuff early than it is to try and do the content and the formatting all at the same time. Okay, and then the most important deadlines, the approval deadlines. Please hear me when I say the deadlines on here are not submission deadlines. These are approval deadlines. I have had so many people misunderstand that and submit their paper to me for the first time on the approval deadline. Unless your paper is absolutely perfect, I have yet to have a perfect paper the first time. So unless your paper is absolutely perfect, you're gonna miss the deadline. So please make sure that you are aware that your deadline, these are approval deadlines. So Edward asks, can we submit an almost complete draft for review? Yes, absolutely. If your paper, I've had papers submitted for formatting check that have whole chapters that haven't been written. But if you get a baseline of what you need to be aware of and what you need to change earlier rather than later, oh my gosh, it speeds up the process so much. So please, if you have a decent draft of your paper, you can submit that as soon as possible. But just want to highlight these approval deadlines. So this is COGS ETD, that's me. I approve your paper for formatting. That initiates the approval process for your committee and department head. This is 2 weeks prior to this deadline. Why is that? You've met faculty. They can sometimes take forever to complete required things. So we want to make sure that from the moment that they have it, they have a sufficient amount of time to read through your paper and to approve it. This amount of time also allows you to have bad emails in there, or they may have further edits they request. And so if you don't give them enough time to complete the approval and go through all the rigmarole they may ask you to, you're gonna miss the deadline. This is your end all be all deadline. If your paper is not approved by this day at 5 p.m., you do not get your degree that semester. It sucks. These are deadlines. They're set in stone based on the academic calendar. So now that I've hammered that into you, please make sure you commit these to memory, depending on the semester you're in. Then I'm going to scroll through the rest of this just really quickly. These are just a couple of resources things. So again, that resources page we talked about, the template, and then me. And it kind of just describes who I am and what I do. And finally, this is my favorite section of all. So you're ready to go. You have the formatting information. You're working on your draft. You want me to check it for formatting. We're going to talk about things that people ask that make them not submit. So when should I submit my paper to ETD for formatting checks? As soon as possible. Don't wait until after your defense to submit. Like Edward mentioned, you do not have to have this completed yet. I am not reading the content. I'm looking at all the little bitty details. But the sooner I have access to your paper to look at it, the sooner you can knock out those formatting things, and the sooner you can be done with things and not have to stress about it. So, is my ETD submission final? This is one of the things that really trips people up. When you go in to submit your paper, it's gonna feel like, oh my gosh, I'm hitting submit. This is it. This is the only chance I get. That is not true. Your ETD submission, when you make it, is not final and will not be sent to your committee in any capacity. It is literally impossible for you to send your paper to your committee. I am the gatekeeper. So when you submit, it only comes to me. However, if you don't fully submit your paper in ETD, if you save it as a draft, if you just do kind of everything else and then you save it as a draft, I can't see it and you're not added to my queue. So you have to make sure that when you submit it and then when you're submitting revisions, there is a submit button in the lower right corner you're going to have to click in order for me to be able to see it. Do I create a new submission in ETD every time I revise my paper? No, please don't do that. If you created a new submission every time you submitted a revision, I would have hundreds of submissions for the entire semester. So you can replace your thesis or dissertation document as many times as you want. As you go through the submission, there's a section to select replace. You just replace it, you click the submit revision section, and then I get to see it again. So please don't create a new submission every time. Last semester, I had somebody create an entirely new profile and then create a new submission. So don't do that. It gets super confusing for everybody. So please just use the one submission that you have. When you're going through, you are required to upload a repository agreement. That nice little section I showed you on the resources page, you're required to submit that. Does it have to be completed and signed before I submit my paper? No, please don't let that hold you up. If you get to that section, you're like, well, crap, I don't have that. That's okay. Submit a blank document. Submit a blank piece of paper. I've seen that before. Please don't let that hold you up. You do have to have it completed before we finish the, the final approval and the publishing of your paper. But do not let that hold you up from submitting your paper for me to check it. All right, publishing options. As you're going to go through the submission, it's going to ask you to make a few selections. One of those things is publishing options. Publishing options are how and when we publish your paper. You're required to have your paper published as part of your degree, and it's going to be published through two different platforms. It's going to be published in the University of Idaho repository. It's listed as institutional repository. That's us. And then you're also going to have the ProQuest repository. It's listed as PQ publishing options. You're going to choose traditional publishing. If you choose open access publishing, it's going to charge you $95. Open access publishing isn't really necessary unless you are very keen to make sure that literally any Joe Blow off the street can read it. The open access publishing means that anybody can read it anywhere, anytime, but Traditional publishing puts it out through the ProQuest and University of Idaho repositories, which are fully accessible to everybody in the academic community who would need to see it. So if you think you need open access, consult with your major professor. Secondly, people mostly select do not delay release. However, you may need to delay the release if you have proprietary information in there, or you have a paper that you've submitted to a journal that is going to come out later and they want you to hold it. They may ask you to hold it. We can embargo or hold your paper for up to 2 years. Please consult with your department ahead, no, sorry, your major professor to determine what you need to do. Should I be making purchases? No, probably not. You don't need to file for copyright unless you've created some magical new thing that you want to patent. You probably don't need to pay for open access publishing. The only thing people sometimes do is buy printed and bound copies. You're more than welcome to do that. Just please be aware, if you aren't sure and then you want to add them later, you can't retroactively add purchased bound copies. So try to determine that beforehand. If not, the University of Idaho print shop will also provide that service for you. And then finally, and this is something that I never thought I'd have to say, but really want to hammer this home. What else should I be aware of when I'm creating my submission? Your email addresses. So you're going to be prompted to put in there the email addresses of your major professor and your committee members. You can edit these and double check them and add them up until I approve the paper for formatting. After I approve the paper for formatting, you have no more access to your submission. So please make sure you have the correct email addresses entered for each person. These email addresses are literally the only way that your committee members are going to be notified to check and approve your paper. I cannot tell you how many students have either missed the deadline or gotten so close to missing the deadline because they mistyped the email address, or they didn't double check it, or they typed in the wrong, edu, or they didn't realize the person was in Canada and so they didn't type that in. All of that. You have to make sure that these are entered properly, because I don't know. That's on you. You have to make sure that you have the correct information in there. Otherwise, there's no way to know, and the email will just go off into the ether, and then they won't know they need to approve it. So please, please, please make sure you do that. I will remind you probably at some point, but just be aware of that. Okay, and that's it. That's my whole spiel. Does anybody have any more questions? Sorry, I only gave you about 7 minutes to do so, but I'm more than willing to stick around if anybody needs more information.
I just had a quick question since you
Sure.
mentioned copyrights. Like in my it's a master's thesis, and I use a lot of like sources from like Life magazine, whatever, and I have like figures of like magazine photos. Do I need to worry about getting copyright like use rights or whatever for that kind of stuff?
Yeah, you might want to double check. Typically when you're utilizing that and it's from a public publication, it's not an issue. That's kind of a person-to-person basis. So I double check with your major professor to see if they know anything, or email the publication just to double check. But as long as you're properly citing that you have that information from that place and you're not trying to present it as your own, that's typically what is needed. The copyright on your side is typically if you want to copyright something as your information. So that's what it is on ETD side. But as far as getting permission to utilize other documentation, that's kind of a person-to-person basis. I double check with the publication or your major professor just to see, but it's typically not an issue as long as you properly cite where you got that information from.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else? I know I just gave you a ton of information, but again, if you think something else, I am available. So I have a couple more slides, but I won't bother with them because it's literally just me telling you. I am primarily working from home. I am in the office on the U of I campus in Morrill Hall 104 from about 12 to 12:30 to 3 to 3:30 on Tuesday, Thursdays. I usually am there longer the later in the semester we get, so that I'm more available to you. But if you have any questions at all, I am a super fast emailer. So I'm really happy to answer any questions that you have as we go along. I'm here on Zoom. I just have so much respect for all of you, and I know that this process is a little bit convoluted, but I am the source of all knowledge. I've looked at hundreds of papers at this point, and so any question that you have, I'm going to be on top of it, and we're going to work together to make this happen. So, yeah. Thank you guys so much